Whenever you hit maybe the 3,000 to 5,000 parcels mark, it's definitely worthwhile to check the process.
What do you think are the top 3 issues that brands are facing in cross-border commerce right now?
It's definitely paperwork and data.
The whole Brexit issue kind of pushed out a lot of the smaller players that couldn't afford that didn't have the know-how or that couldn't afford more expensive solutions.
If you take Coro, for example, they reduced delivery times by 2 days to the UK ever since they started working with us.
Where do you think we are in terms of sustainability goals, and how do you see this market evolving? Hello and welcome to the EGN Podcast. I'm your host, Efe von Thenen, and today I'm thrilled to welcome Kathrin Hösl, Chief Commercial Officer at Exporto. Exporto is revolutionizing e-commerce by making it truly borderless with innovative technology and proven logistics. With over a decade of experience in the industry, Kathrin will share insights on the German market and how it compares to its neighbors, changes in shipment after the Brexit, and the now and the future of international trade. Stay tuned for an episode packed with valuable insights and practical advice from a seasoned e-commerce expert herself. Kathrin, very nice to have you in our show. Welcome to Berlin. How was your ride?
Thank you very much for the invitation. Actually, it was quite smooth, to be honest. I arrived yesterday already by train and spent the night here. Had some very nice sushi with you. Thanks for the tip.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
So I'm quite relaxed and ready to go.
Very excited about talking to you because even earlier, as we were sitting together, I was telling you that I'm amazed what you've done in German e-commerce landscape already. You've been around for quite some years and in several companies doing very important stuff. So without further ado, I'd say go ahead and introduce yourself.
All right. Thank you. My name is Kathrin. I'm 43 years old. And currently, I'm a Chief Commercial Officer at Exporto, located at the Lake of Constance. So beautiful area. Whenever you have the chance to get there, visit us. I've been doing sales my entire life, but changed industry quite often. So starting from laboratory glassware over kitchen furniture, etc. And then finally, I ended up in the e-commerce industry 2012, starting as a key account manager at the Neckermann platform, which was in these days probably the preface of our well-known marketplace business as it is today. Yeah. And ever since, I fell in love with that industry and never changed it. I just changed, let's say, roles and companies, but stayed in the industry at different positions of the supply chain, if you wish. Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about those stops?
Yeah,
that you had?
Absolutely. So as I said, with Neckermann, I had the platform side. And when unfortunately Neckermann got bankrupt, I switched positions and started as head of sales and key account management at a very young company called TradeByte in 2012, actually. And I started there as number 31, 32, something like that, and built up the company from scratch, more or less. Wow. So, there were hardly any salespeople, no key account managers.
How many people were you guys back in the day?
So when I left last year, it was at 370. Okay. Yeah. So quite a journey with various, let's say, roles also. So from head of key account management and sales, I took the responsibility for all, let's say, customer-headed or customer-heading departments like onboarding, support. Everybody who was talking to customers was underneath my responsibilities, up to 60 people to some extent.
At the time when you left TradeByte, you were COO and managing director.
Correct. Yes. So once everything was well settled for sales and the customer side, I changed roles completely within TradeByte. That was shortly after Zalando bought the company. So in 2016. And I was responsible at the end for HR and internal tooling and processes.
Wow.
So a completely different story, but it helped me a lot also to get more knowledge and insights into organizational development, from startup to scale up, also company mergers. So, for example, we were merged with our old competitor called Anatwine in the UK. So I also accompanied that project. So it was quite a ride, to be honest.
Yeah.
But after 10 days and after 10 years and extraordinary growth, I felt it was time to start something new and also smaller again.
Yeah.
And then I took over the Chief Commercial Officer role at Exporto. We are doing cross-border logistics, including customs and tax. So a kind of one-stop shop for your cross-border sales into non-EU countries, if you wish.
Yeah.
And currently we are around 100 people, so a lot smaller again, and back to the roots. So I'm with sales, quite happy about that, to be honest.
No longer doing HR.
It's quite hard, but it was also very interesting, especially during that COVID thing, right? With all these new regulations, and there were no peers you could exchange on the topic because nobody had that experience before. So it was quite rough, but I didn't regret it.
So you started at Exporto after COVID, right?
Correct. Yeah, I'm with Exporto now since a year, actually.
Okay.
Tomorrow it's a year.
Yeah, it feels like much longer somehow.
Absolutely. Yeah. It felt like they were absorbing me, to be honest, on day 2 already.
But how did you come up with Exporto? Like how did you know them before or?
No, not really. So obviously within TradeByte, we were always looking for building the bridge between marketplace business and the non-EU countries. But actually it was Julius, our CEO, who found me on LinkedIn for whatever reasons. So he met some of my former employees, and he wanted to know the person behind these 2 guys. Yeah. And then he reached out to me, and we had a very nice talk. And then, it felt like coming home to some extent, because with Alno, I was already in the Lake of Constance region anyway, a couple of years ago. And I thought that's a good opportunity to...
Yeah. I'm super excited to discover the space you're in and also get to know Exporto a little bit better today, your typical customer profile and how you solve a market need. But before we get into those things, I'd like to talk a little bit about, since you've been at e-commerce for quite some time now, and I feel like after COVID, which gave e-commerce a certain push, we've landed in a phase of slow recovery right now. We had several crises in the past, like inflation, Ukraine war, and all these things I don't have to mention because everyone knows about these things by now. But now we seem to be in a phase of slow recovery. And how do you see the situation in Germany right now from your perspective, where you are today? And is there light at the end of the tunnel?
Yeah. Well, actually, from my point of view, you could even say that Germany is stuck to some extent. I can hardly see any innovation, even though everybody's talking about it, like personalization, AI, data-driven decision-taking, all these different playgrounds everybody's busy at. But from my point of view, nobody is there where they want it to be. And there is so much more to work on and to get to. And I feel that typically German, we are a little bit, cautious maybe, if you wish.
German Angst maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So from my point of view, looking at the industry, it feels like I always want to push everyone, right? So roll up your sleeves, get things done. You can't sit there and wait forever, right?
Kathrin, on your LinkedIn, I think I even saw that it says, you're not a talker, you're a doer, something like that. So I'm very excited about some of the examples that you have a good proven track record of success either way in sales. But I think that also during the podcast episodes, we hear a lot of companies trying to innovate, at least. I mean, talking doesn't necessarily mean that people don't want to innovate. So I think many people are trying, but in the implementation, we don't see that many real examples yet, at least.
Yeah.
Well, what I find interesting is that you're an international company, so you are in several markets. I think where you are probably in a position to compare the German market situation to elsewhere.
Yeah. Well, actually, I find it quite difficult to compare the markets with each other because, especially when it comes to size or challenges. For example, if you look to Switzerland, you have 3 spoken languages in one country. Or if you come to the Nordics, where you sometimes have to get across various kilometers until you find a house. So especially in the logistics industry, it's quite challenging. So every country has its specific, let's say, challenges to master. So a concrete comparison is quite hard. But I feel that they are much more willing to change their situation, right? If you, for example, take the British people, they were confronted with Brexit, and all of a sudden, I'm not sure, do you remember these kilometer-long truck lines on the news?
I do.
So, and everybody was waiting for, I'm not sure, maybe 4 weeks, 5 weeks, and then they started to order cross-border again. Obviously, they had to wait a little longer, but due to the limited assortment on their home market, they dared to do experiments.
Yeah.
And this is what I miss a little bit here in Germany.
Can you give us some examples? What kind of experiments from that time?
So they ordered and, for example, waited maybe 7 weeks or 7 days or 8 days until they got their parcel delivered. And they didn't know who actually will appear in front of their doorstep because you were not 100% sure who will be last mile carrier or delivering your parcel. And obviously, some started to build warehouses in Germany or maybe somewhere in Benelux to serve the market and don't lose it completely. Unfortunately, you must be able to afford that because costs are quite heavy. But still, they tried to make the best out of the situation, right?
But it did bring a level of complexity to the whole shipment game, right?
Yes. Absolutely. So, I mean, we still hear, and it's a long time after Brexit, right? We still hear complaints about the additional paperwork or additional regulatory stuff, long waiting times in front of the borders, stuff like that. So it's obviously not everything solved. But this is why we are here, right? So
we can I think so. I mean, from what I understood, I'm not an expert on what you do yet, but that's why we have you here. I think my feeling is that the whole Brexit issue kind of pushed out a lot of the smaller players that couldn't afford that didn't have the know-how or that couldn't afford more expensive solutions, perhaps. Would you agree that it was kind of like they were the losers from the whole thing, or do you have a different perspective?
No, I absolutely agree. So I even read an interesting figure. I think it was 42% that, let's say, variety of assortment decreased after Brexit for British exports. So there are some figures available which clearly show the problem Brexit
for the other businesses that stayed in the game. Can you tell us a little bit about how you help them?
Sure. So usually what they did is either putting in a warehouse on the continent with heavy extra costs, or they sometimes outsource business. So for example, Amazon or Zalando, so the typical platform businesses who offer these services, also to do fulfillment for these people. Also, again, very heavy costs. And then there are some smaller solutions like, for example, Global E, which you could connect to your, let's say, buying basket. And then they take over all the remaining stuff regarding customs duties, customs clearance, transportation and stuff. But then you lose the final contact to the customer, right? It's like giving away the power over the data, for example. And what we do differently is obviously everybody could stay where they are. We collect the goods directly from their warehouse, either in Germany to bring it to the UK or from UK to Germany. We do the customs clearance. We do the tax part. So, for example, if a company needs a fiscal representation in the one or other country, we could do that as well. So they have a kind of one-stop shop solution for the whole process after, let's say, checkout of the end consumer and last mile delivery.
So, do you think this your participation in the whole thing also has an impact on? I think this is a no-brainer, but also the delivery times and the reducing bumps in the customer journey or like the experience as well.
Absolutely. So as we do that all automatically via interfaces, we don't have any waiting time at the customs, for example, at the borders. And we have some very famous examples. If you take Coro, for example, they reduced delivery times by 2 days to the UK. Cool. Ever since they started working with us.
Shout out to our friends at Coro at this stage. Very nice that you mentioned them. I think that's a great example. Starting with Brexit, but also I know that you're in other markets as well, like for example the Nordics, where you can probably share some anecdotes. I mean, like in general, the stagnation or like the slowdown in recovery in Germany doesn't seem to exist in some of the other European markets like Switzerland. They seem to be doing quite well, and the Nordics. Can you share some of your experience in those markets as well?
Absolutely, yeah. So Switzerland is quite extraordinary, I would say. The market is very, very small, to be honest, but with the biggest purchasing power in whole of Europe. So the
Who's
biggest,
second?
Liechtenstein.
They're even smaller.
So they are even smaller, that's true. And one thing what is also very special with Switzerland is that you have a VAT rate of 8.1% compared to the 19 here in Germany. So you have the margin already by 8% points bigger compared to Germany. And then it's easy to do the calculation with the longer delivery, for example. Actually, Swiss Post is not as cheap, probably the most expensive last mile carrier, but they have a first time delivery rate of more than 99%.
Oh, wow.
So Swiss people are very trustworthy. They are very traditional. So they most of the time they know their last mile postman at the doorstep, and they like to have, let's say, local services. For example, also local payment provider called Twint. I'm not sure whether you know them.
Not familiar with them. I think rings a bell, but.
So I think even 62% of brands selling in Switzerland offer that service because it's the most common one, to be honest. And so you conquer the Swiss people's hearts if you offer their local services. And so anyway, compared to Switzerland, you can find everything cheaper. Besides gas, maybe. So cross-border sales is very, very common and typical. And if we look at customers selling via Exporto to Switzerland, they are about 20 to 25 year over year compared to last year, which shows that there is or let's say a market which is getting back up again. And as I said, I don't see that stagnation as we do in Germany.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting. And so I would also assume that you have an important role that you're playing in return handling and return processes. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about this as well.
Yeah, sure. So we have our own warehouses in all the countries we operate in.
Yeah.
So the customer has, or the end consumer, let's put it that way, has a local experience. So that he receives a parcel with a Swiss Post label on it. And most of the time, you already have a Swiss Post return label in the parcel with our return address in Tegerwillen, for example. And then we have a local return address in all these countries. And we check the parcel, especially for, let's say, customs clearance issues. And then, we bring it across the border back to Germany and then back to the brand, our customer.
Summarizing all of this, like, what do you think are the top 3 issues that brands are facing in cross-border commerce right now in the European continent?
So it's definitely paperwork and data.
Yeah.
So there are so many brands out there still who do not have tariff codes, for example, for these countries. So we are also enriching these tariff codes and data.
Yeah.
Then you have issues with delivery times because you need to wait until you get customs clearance done. Otherwise, the truck is not able to leave your warehouse. So at most of the time, we are 1 or 2 days faster compared to your actual delivery time. And the most important thing is that very often end consumers have to pay at the doorstep.
Yeah.
So customers get delivered duty unpaid deliveries. Most obviously even without knowing in advance.
Yeah.
So they won't order again. And you have a very, very high frustration rate at the end consumer's end because of these additional paperwork and costs.
And I can also assume that you're observing quite a bit of a different consumer behavior in these markets that you're in, right? So that where the German, I mean, like I mentioned this at the opening keynote at the Expo, German consumers are kind of moving towards more experiences. They're spending their money not just on products anymore, but they're more on having holidays and having experiences. Maybe the sense of community is becoming even more important, which is a driver in consumer behavior and purchases, right? So if you feel a sense of belonging to a certain brand and the community that comes with it. I'm quite curious about how that is developing in other markets. Also, like now we are pretty much disrupted by players like Temu and Shein, right? So that is also a huge fulfillment engine that is behind it, like the shipment that comes with it, like millions and millions of parcels that are just flowing in. So like how do you see the development for the German consumers, where the priorities are, I think at that point we can compare it to other markets as well.
Yeah. Well, at the time being, I feel that the markets we just mentioned, like Switzerland and the Nordics, maybe not so much UK, but Switzerland and Nordics are very much traditional, I would say. They have a very close eye on transparency. So, for example, if you cannot see what will be the cost upon delivery, if they have no clue how they can easily return the shipment in case they don't want to have it, they look into brand quality, they look into maybe sustainability stuff.
Yeah.
And these are obviously all topics which are on a very, very high scale. And especially due to the fact that, for example, in the Nordics, you can have very bad weather conditions, especially during winter, for example, they are fine to wait 1 or 2 or maybe even 3 days longer, depending on the region where they live in, right? So they are much more focusing on get the stuff to a very attractive price. Is there a transparency regarding additional costs, if there are any? And they are even willing to pay extra for service. From my point of view, for example, if you have extra heavy parcels, or let's say skiing stuff with higher dimensions, and you state these costs, they have a decision, right? And they always want to be able to decide. So the power for decision.
Don't get a big surprise at the end of the month. Something like that.
Absolutely. And obviously the UK market is a little bit different, because I mean it's not only the third biggest market e-commerce wise, but it's also, let's say, more into these social media things already, right? Especially due to their closeness to the United States. So this is also the reason why the TikToks and everyone starts in Europe, in the United Kingdom.
It's been traditionally a very developed e-commerce market, like the US market, China, and UK markets tend to be among the most developed. And we, as you said, in Germany, we have the problem of talking a lot and doing a little bit less. So how do we get over that hurdle, right? So it's I think one thing that we haven't touched upon is also your ICP, ideal customer profile. So we talked about the smaller guys, we talked about big businesses, but who is your ideal customer that you can help with your services?
So out of history, obviously, we are pretty much in the fashion industry, but generally we could serve everybody who ships parcels. So obviously the lighter the better and the cheaper. But we are not so much focusing on fashion industry only. So we serve pet food, we serve supplements, also beauty items to some extent. So maybe shipping everything where what fits into a parcel is a good approach. And
we had some beauty brands, and we had some of those segments that you mentioned, even in the podcast. So
yeah, true, absolutely. I listened to some of them already, and we are very familiar with all of these. And they use different approaches depending on age, for example, and also depending on let's say the status in the market. So, for example, many brands start with a typical DHL setup, because this is what they know from their home market, right? And once they hit probably, I'm not sure, 3,000 to 5,000 parcels a year, it's getting very annoying. Because you have all that additional paperwork with you have to put outside
higher
the box
level of complexity.
And, absolutely. So whenever you hit maybe the 3,000 to 5,000 parcels mark, it's definitely worthwhile to check the process and check what we could optimize and get a little bit cheaper.
Or like companies that are looking to sell more towards Britain, England, and stuff like this. So it might be also quite relevant for you, I guess. As far as I understand, many countries. You cover the European continent, right?
Correct. Yes. So our focus definitely is, let's say, the non-EU countries like Switzerland, the UK, and Norway. But for example, we also serve whole Scandinavia, because we have to drive through them to Norway anyway. So Denmark, Switzerland, and Sweden, and Finland. And we are also willing to expand into further markets next year, but it's not yet clear which ones these will be, to be honest.
When you mentioned the topic of talking about innovation and not doing much about it, what's your take on the whole buzz of AI in our industry? So like using AI, how do you see that disrupting your industry? In shipments, for example, is it already playing a big part? Or is it more like, for the time being, is it being used mostly to make sense of the data that exists anyway? Can you shed some light onto this?
Yeah, the topic is quite, let's say, diverse, right? So, for example, if we use our tariff code piece of software, this is already AI driven, to be honest. And learning with every assortment we are onboarding.
Oh, okay.
But if you, for example, check how easy it is to track a parcel end to end, so from leaving a warehouse until they got first scanned at our cross-dock and then injected to the Swiss Post, you have, for example, a complete black hole on the first mile. So from the warehouse to the first Exporto warehouse or scan. And I feel what we definitely need to do is get more and more data, connect that data to then be able to do a much better forecasting. So, for example, there are so many trucks half empty. And then you have days
increase efficiencies.
And then you have a day where pallets are left because the truck already was full. So the whole thing of forecasting is unbelievably hard for the time being still. That would be a major impact if we could gather more data and maybe also
make sense of it.
learn real time what we need to pick up, what we don't have to, and stuff like that. And also assortment wise. So, I mean, we know every purchase, for example, if we stick with Switzerland, we know the postcode, we have a gender, we have all that information. But so far, we don't make use of it to tell other brands, look, we have maybe, I'm not sure, 5 brands selling underwear. You could be the 6th one, and this is how they perform and why we believe you could perform the very same way if you improve X, Y, Z.
Yeah, exactly.
So the data is all there, but we don't yet make use of it. And I feel this is definitely a field we need to dive deeper into, to be honest.
Maybe this is a field where innovation needs to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, you need to get the parties together at the table, right? Because it's all different stakeholders, and that makes it difficult.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm also curious about your thoughts on sustainability, because I think this is where you have a big footprint, also shipping all these parcels across countries. Where do you think we are in terms of sustainability goals, and how do you see this market evolving? Do you think like e-commerce is doing its own fair share, getting more sustainable?
That's another good example of we need to bring parties together to get more PS onto the road. So if you use all these cardboard boxes and everybody has their own system, it's getting quite hard to, let's say, get less waste out of e-commerce business, right? I know that there are experiments going on with reusable plastic boxes, but if they only can be used by one provider, it will be not a thing to do for an end consumer, right? Too complicated.
Makes less sense,
and stuff like that. So I guess we need to get these stakeholders together and check who would like to be part of it. And then things like that could get on the road, but so far I can't see anything as one of these initiatives. So we're pretty much stuck either with mobility, so that you switch to maybe electric trucks or stuff like that. I mean, we see that on the last mile already. So for example, Swiss Post or DHL, they have a huge fleet with electric cars, to be honest. But still room for improvement, I assume. And the bigger the distance gets, the harder it is for electrical cars, right? So this is also definitely something we could improve. And then when it comes to warehousing, cross-dock warehouses, stuff like that, of course you could do renewable energy or so as I said, there is so much room for improvement still, but either money is a problem, time is a problem, and what definitely is also a problem is resources in times of, let's say, a shortage of resources.
It's incredible listening to you, just like because you have a wealth of experience observing this industry for quite some time. I think one thing I'd like to get out of this conversation is also consolidating all this into 3 key pieces of advice, for the brands. Would you have 3 key takeaways for us? What to do that helps them become more successful?
Closing the cycle to my roll up your sleeves attitude. I would say that especially the bigger companies who have the money should get a little less complicated when it comes to project management, right? Start with an MVP. Of course, you can research which market fits best to your product. But don't make it too complicated, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes we do 6, 10, 12 months only in project planning and haven't turned one stone, right? So get things started and then iterate, like in the software industry, right? MVPs start with something, and then you can iterate on the process. You can recheck partners you might have onboarded. You could always improve in the end when you did the first learnings. But first, you have to start doing learnings.
Yeah.
So that would be number 1. Number 2 is that we are in a very big bubble, right? So in e-commerce, everybody knows everybody. This is right. So whenever somebody stood up and said, well, Switzerland didn't work at all for us, everybody believes it and they don't even give it a try. So my advice would be get out of your bubble and talk to people for which it worked.
Yeah.
So that's definitely something, because there are so many good examples out of it. Why always talking about the bad stuff? Right. So that was definitely something I wish for. And then I would say, especially also with my marketplace background, I would love to see marketplaces less complicated. So for example, British marketplaces insist on British warehouses for marketplace partners. I don't see any reason, because they don't have to take the risk anyway. So they should leave it to the brand. And if they can manage to ship a parcel from Germany to the UK or the other way around within 3 to 4 days, why not give it a try? So being one of the first movers with platform business, maybe besides Amazon, but given Zalando, or even earlier with Quelle or Neckermann, we should give it a try and have more confidence in people who are willing to meet the process requirements and just check it out.
That's a great statement, and also a great way to end things on a positive note, because we started with e-commerce is stuck in Germany, and then talked about other markets where it's performing differently, not directly comparable to one another, as you said, rightly pointed out. But still, I think it's important to recognize what's going on in other places, because especially for e-commerce brands that are active in several markets, they have to come to terms with individual customer journeys, individual requirements of each market to be able to have an overall success. So for me, that was very enlightening to listen to you. And we have also had a chance to understand how brands can profit from your services. So I would like to call anyone, if they fit the target group of anything above 3,000 parcels shipped per month, and
per year.
Per year, even better actually.
Even better.
That it's a larger ICP. If you fit this target group, and if you need some help with non-EU shipments, I think even you mentioned along the way going up to the Nordics, you also cover Finland and Sweden, such markets. So anyone who has questions where you need expert opinion, reach out to Kathrin. Thank you so much for being here with us, Kathrin, coming all the way to Berlin and from Konstanz. And yeah, I'm looking forward to our next talk.
Thank you very much for having me. It was a pleasure to do the trip, actually. We also have an office here in Berlin, so I always try to get some dots connected, let's say. I'm always a very, I wouldn't call myself a connecting person. So connecting brands to marketplaces, connecting people, connecting biz with tech,
Yeah,
all the stuff. So connecting is one of my mottos, I would say.
Yeah.
So whenever I'm in Berlin, I do connect with customers, peers, or with you.
Thank you so much, Kathrin.
All right, Efe. Thank you very much again.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of the EGN Podcast. If you found our discussion insightful, don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channels on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Your support helps us grow and improve our content. See you next time.